Kurt Wagner, the amazing Nightcrawler. First appearance, Giant Size X-Men #1, 1975. Hey guys, y'all know who it is, what's going on, when it's happening, where it's at, and why we're here today. How you doing? It is I, the sublimely magnificent Big Ugly himself, Omari Ellis, feogrande on YouTube, sometimes referred to as Pete on this show, and I am joined by the man, the myth, the legend, he who bears watching, Superjaz.
What's going on, everybody? I'm the other host of the show. Like you said, I go by the name of Superjaz. Or you could call me Jazz, SJJT, whatever you want, what have you, in the like. And yes, as he said, this is the Whatever We Want podcast, where we do not lead this conversation. This conversation leads us, and we let these chips fall where they may.
Every Wednesday. Indeed we do. Like he said, the Whatever We Want podcast, where we talk about just that, whatever we want. And yeah, so what I want to talk about today, I'm going to start off briefly, because I know you probably got a topic too, but this is a couple of weeks old, but I'm start off with a little bit of football talk involving the Carolina Panthers.
Get it.
Now, they immediately won the game right after they had done this. They probably, I'm going to assume, lost the game after that, knowing this team. Carolina Panthers, I think the owner has decided to go full tank mode. He traded away our secondary receiver, although that seemed like that needed to happen, Robbie Anderson, because he was arguing with the wide receivers coaches and everything on the sideline mid-game and got kicked out of the game, and they had his ass on a new team by Monday. Argue with a coach on Sunday, traded on Monday. They wanted his ass out of there. They traded away for like a 6th round pick in 2025. Like, they just said, what'd you go give us for this guy? Nothing? Cool, we'll take it. What? Fuck out of here. Exactly. And then that Thursday, they made another surprising decision. Christian McCaffrey, who is the face of the franchise now that Cam Newton is gone, or was gone. Yes, he's a white running back who's really, really fucking good. Had a bit of problem staying healthy, but when you have to carry a team, when you have no one else on there really doing anything, you're going to get hit a lot, especially as a running back. That said, they traded him away to the 49ers. He's a 49er now. Probably had a great game this past Sunday. Didn't have the best game the first Sunday because they traded him on a Thursday, like... Literally, he gets to San Francisco. They're like, all right, it's Friday, 2 days from now, we got to play somebody. Obviously, he's not going to be ready in their playbook and stuff for that day. But I'm assuming now that it's been a week, he's probably had a fantastic day. Surprisingly, though, the Panthers, right after getting rid of them and then looking like they were going to shop off some of their other big pieces, like the owner just really wanted to get rid of everybody. They had a game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Tampa?
That's not my phrasing. That's what lots of people called them. They used to call them the Tampa Bay Gronkaneers, but Gronk left the team. So it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I've never heard it referred to as Tampa.
Well, you see, Tom Brady's their quarterback.
Oh. Say no more.
Tom Brady's their quarterback. And surprisingly, the Panthers beat them 21-3.
That's pretty surprising.
Very surprising. But much like I told Ibn, shout outs to Ibn, when he sent me something on Twitter like, hey, how about that game turning out? Because I'm a Carolina Panthers fan now. St. Louis don't got a team no more, so that's why I don't root for the St. Louis team.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm a Panthers fan. I've never even been to Carolina. But anyway, he's like, how did you like about that win? I'm like, I'm as shocked as everybody else, but I'll always enjoy a Tom Brady defeat because nothing bad ever happens to that man.
Well, something bad did happen to my boy within a few weeks recently.
What?
A certain union got slashed.
Bro, you're talking about his wife who's worth more money than him, so he'd get more money into the divorce anyway, so he still turns it into a win?
Yeah, look at you. You be killing me.
Like, that's the thing. Something that would upset a normal person, he still turns into a win for him. Because the main reason they're getting the divorce is he wanted to keep playing football and she didn't want him to. Well, now she leaves and probably taking the kids, because that's usually how it works. She leaves, takes the kids. Now he's got all the time to play football in this world and no one telling him he can't. And he gets some more money because of it, because she's worth more money than he is. And that's how divorce works. So he's taking half of her shit instead of her taking half of his. So he just makes out, he net positives.
I mean, but still, you know, if there's a possibility of him actually loving this woman and they broke that shit off, it would, you know, tug on his heartstrings and ego, and I mean, not even just ego, but just like his heartstrings. Ego? Huh?
His ego.
I mean, yeah, ego was the wrong word. Ego was the wrong word. That was a slip of the tongue.
For Tom fucking Brady.
But he would tug on his heartstrings and tug on, like, you know, his love
have any
and
fucking heartstrings.
Break his heart and romance and all that shit. Like,
only thing that man loves is football. Clearly.
I don't fucking know what that man loves or what he doesn't love.
When the wife goes, it's football or me, and he says, well, down said hike. Clearly, he likes more than one than the other. And that's on him. It's a free country. He can like football more than his wife. That's fine. That's what he chose to do. But my thing is, I'm not going to sit here and feel sorry for him because of something he literally chose to do of his own volition and that he netted positive on.
But no, this is true that he chose to keep doing it. I didn't know the ins and outs and the whereabouts of the divorce. I just knew that they were getting divorced, and it was like, oh damn, wow, all right.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that was like it was conditional. But yeah.
No, that a lot of this had to do. Now we don't know the exact details, but it's clear that in recent years it's been more and more. Tom probably needs to retire, and he's like, yeah, what the family want me to retire, yeah, but my heart's in football. Then he finally says he's going to retire to spend more time with family in earlier this year. And if you guys saw me on here, I said I don't believe it because we're not allowed to have nice things. He's probably going to be suiting up in the fall. Lo and behold, he was suiting up in the fall.
Said something along the lines, yes.
He was suiting up in the fall, and that's when he started having relationship issues more and more publicly the second he decided to go back to football, and now there's the rumored divorce. Because that's, I think, the other thing. I think it's still just rumors at this point.
He's 45?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's just rumors at this point. But like I said, the dude's going to make out like a bandit money-wise, and he still gets to do what he likes to do, which is football. And if he really wanted another hot supermodel wife, he could get it. The man's rich as shit, even richer now. 7-time Super Bowl champion, Tom Brady. He literally loses nothing. He just keeps rolling with it and moving forward. Some people just don't have bad things happen to him. He's one of them. It sucks, but it is the way it is.
I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of that.
I did think it was funny after they lost to the Panthers that Antonio Brown, who is a terrible person, calm down people, but he had a funny tweet where he was like, Tampon Bay, Tom Booty. Because he doesn't like Tom Brady. Which is crazy, considering Tom Brady was the only reason that man got to play on a Super Bowl winning team, because every other team was done with Antonio Brown. Like, and I see, for all you people who say I wantonly hate number 12 with no logic, no, I will say, in that particular situation, no, Tom Brady technically went out of his way to be like, no, I know you guys don't want, no other team wants him right now because nigga crazy. but I want him.
Maybe
Let's
Tom
put
didn't
him on
say
here.
that exact phrase. No.
Well, yeah, he probably spelled it differently. But the bottom line is, he's like, I want him on my team.
Get the fuck. Close his laptop.
And he's like, I want him on my team. And so he stuck his, reputation and stuff out for him, only for Antonio Brown to go crazy and fucking jumping jacks on the field. And now we don't see him again anymore unless it's a clip of him over in Dubai taking his dick out in a public pool.
Even again, shout out to Big Bro. Even told me about some of that shit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
that's why I had to make sure that when I said I laughed at a joke he made, I had to make sure, like, calm down, people. I am still agreeing he's a terrible person.
Kill me.
It was just a joke that he made that I thought was kind of funny. Anyway, so that's football talk. The Panthers, I don't know what they're doing this season. I don't know if they're tanking or not, considering it seems like they're tanking when they get rid of their best player, but for not even any good draft picks. It's all like second and third rounders and no first rounders or anything. But then they turn around and beat Tampa Bay. So I don't know. I wonder what they did this week. Obviously, slight spoilers. We record these a little bit in advance sometimes. So there you go. But that's why I'm like, maybe we won this Sunday.
Right, we don't know, obviously, because this is, like you said, 2 weeks before. So,
also, I guess I should explain the beginning thing. For those of you guys who haven't watched a lot of the show, we had this thing where it started by Superjaz, where started episode with something. I believe he started it with movie quotes, and he started it with like a different letter each time alphabetically. He started with H because hasta la vista, baby.
On accident, like a motherfucker.
He started with H, but once he completed his circle around the alphabet, I started with I did song lyrics, did my whole rotation around the alphabet, and then he came back with wrestling quotes and did his whole rotation around the alphabet.
With J, yeah.
To J. So I've, starting with K, doing X-Men characters alphabetically based on their real names, not their code names, but the real names of X-Men characters, and because people would call that too much of a cop-out and too easy to do, I'm also including first appearances.
Which is fucking crazy, and I mean this in the best way possible, but when you said it, I was like, this is some nerdy shit. I was like, and like the best way possible, I was like, that's nerdy as fuck. Like, because you said the real name, then the hero name, then the comic and the issue, the year. I was like, Encyclopedia Brown, motherfucker.
There's going to be a few people on this list whose first appearance was Giant Size X-Men #1, May of 1975. Just so you know.
Well, I mean, but fucking like Beast, fucking first appearance was like what, the original X-Men?
Well, yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, 1963 September.
The fact that you know
Uncanny
the year
X-Men.
and month off the top of your fucking head.
It's the first issue.
But you knew September.
I can't tell you the month. I can't tell you the month that X-Men #12 came out, or the year for that matter.
But you knew the month, bruh, off the top of your head, my dude. Like,
and Superman fans can't tell you when the first issue of that came out.
it just shows the difference between a fan and a fanatic. And I'm not saying you like fanatic, but you drifted over into fanatic. At least
I'm sure JoJo fans could tell you that the first issue of it came out December 2nd, 1986.
Obviously, that's when you're doing your whole. I didn't being funny. You see what I did here?
I may or may not have a friend that shares a birthday with that, and that's the only reason I remember that.
That's funny. What? I may have asked you this on a previous episode because we got so many by now. What made you start reading X-Men all of a sudden and read so many of them?
So, kind of twofold. When I was younger, obviously I liked the X-Men 90s cartoon show. I didn't pay a lot of attention to the plot. I didn't pay a lot of attention to the plot because I didn't pay a lot of attention to the plot of a lot of things when I was that young. I was just like, haha, eye lasers, metal claws, cool. What are their names? All right. That's about it that I did. In the mid 2000s, in the mid first decade of the 2000s, because even though I wanted to get comics as a kid and get into the X-Men comics, my mom was like, you want comics? I got you. Here's Steel, Static, and Black Panther.
Gee, I wonder where that came from, right?
But I wanted to watch this. No, you need to watch more stuff with your own culture. Stop dealing with just white people stuff. Ironic because X-Men is literally an allegory for racism.
Civil rights movement. Like Magneto and Professor X or Malcolm X and Martin Luther King.
Yeah, and for the longest, I didn't get into comics because of that, but wasn't until the mid 2000s because I just didn't like reading.
Did you like that reading?
Reading, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't like reading. Why didn't you get into Harry Potter, Omari? Them books is too fucking long. Ironic, right? So I'm just like, but that was what I would say in middle school. Like, those books is too long. That's too many fucking pages for me. I'll read The Lion, the Bitch, and the Wardrobe. You know, that's like a fraction of the size. And the other Chronicles of Narnia. But I didn't read, Harry Potter. But mid 2000s, I get into anime and manga. When I get into college. And I started reading manga more often, which manga is pretty much comics, but Japanese, they call it manga when they make it over there. And the whole art style involved in that. So got into reading more and more mangas, your Narutos, your Bleaches, your One Pieces, your big three, if you will. I eventually got into each of those. Naruto first. Ironically enough, like most people in the U.S. audience, I got into Naruto before I got into the other two. I think I actually got into Bleach before One Piece as well. In fact, I at one point was like Winnie, who made fun of people for reading One Piece because it was too fucking long. Why are you even bothering? Have they even found the Grand Line yet? What the hell is a Grand Line? No, that was literally arguments I made, just like I hear all the time. That's why I say I get it when a lot of people are like, this series is too long. However, eventually I did start reading those things week to week. And then Marvel had an event, Civil War. They eventually made a movie that was what I use the term loosely. I mean loosely based on the premise of Civil War.
I wasn't a fan, but I'm like the only one that wasn't.
I liked the movie, but it wasn't necessarily what Civil War was. It was to the degree that, oh, here's an incident. Now we have superheroes that need to register. Captain America doesn't wanna. Iron Man does. Pick a side. That's the loosest terms I could think of it. But I had heard all about the comic Civil War event when it happened. And everyone was crazy into it. Like, holy shit, Civil War, Civil War, Civil War, Civil War. And I read, and yes, I know the root of your question. I'm getting there.
Yeah, no, please.
Sorry.
Bless you. It's not like we don't. Bless you. It's not like we don't have a lot of time.
So I read the first thing of Civil War and I thought it was crazy. Or like, damn, this is actually pretty good, Hey, it's reading, but there's also pictures, so I see what's going on. Do I know 90% of the characters in this first issue? No. Who the fuck are the new warriors? Who the hell is Speedball? What? Namorita? What the hell? Nitro? Oh shit, you messing with the big boys now. The inciting incident of Civil War. Essentially, some teenage superheroes trying to do a reality TV show about themselves decide one episode that they found like a hideout for a bunch of notorious superhero or supervillains who normally deal with people, not these teenage superheroes. They normally deal with the real motherfuckers. But they're like, but we got them out of costume at their house. Think of the ratings if we take them down. And they got him on camera pretty much saying, think of the ratings if we take them down. They get caught looking at the villain, so the villains start getting ready to, or they start running or whatever. And Namorita is Namor's cousin, an Atlantean. She fucking tackles this dude Nitro into a fucking school bus across the street from where the villains lived in the afternoon, so a lot of kids are still at school. And she's like, we're gonna take you to jail. He's like, oh, y'all done bit off more than you can chew. You're messing with the big boys now. And he just has a massive explosion go off, killing like 300 or 300 to 600 students at that school. Killing almost all of the new warriors except Speedball. And yeah, it's the Stamford incident. And because it was broadcast, you know, because it was a reality TV show, and they saw that these superheroes were just doing this for shits and giggles for the ratings, lol. People, and after having other recent events that had happened in Marvel to a big degree, people were like, it's time to make superheroes fucking accountable. We need to do this. And they needed to sign up with the government, blah, 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 blah. But I read that and I was like, holy shit. And just seeing like how you had all these characters who had, I did not know where they were coming from, but they all had their different reasons for yes or no. And then you get to one of them, I think, asked Wolverine, and he's like, oh, people being told to register just because they're different than everybody else. Yeah, I'm sitting this one out. I'm not for it, but I'm also not gonna fight anybody that, you know, is or whatever. But I know a few people like that. I've been around for way too long as it is. I know what happened back in the 1930s or 40s. I know what's happening to my people. Fuck this shit. That sounds like a problem for y'all. Welcome to our world. Bye. And he kind of walks away. And every time they talk to the other X-Men also kind of had that feeling of, or other mutants are like, and y'all were fine with this when they were telling us to do it, when they made the giant death robots that literally target us to kill them. Y'all fine with that. So what do you want us to say? Why are we picking a side in this? Because I wanted to read it and I didn't have a lot of money. So I did something, you know, back then that may not be the most smiled upon, but I managed to get my hands on a digital version of a chronological, like a folder with all the issues involving the Civil War storyline from like just chronologically, like 90 to 100 comics.
Yet.
And I read that shit.
Like what year about was this?
2009, 2008, 2009-ish.
I didn't know you like started reading that shit that early.
Yeah, like 2008, 2009-ish was the Civil War thing.
Yeah.
And then I was like, man, this was great.
Wait, no, that does sound a little familiar. I kind of remember you reading some X-Men something around that time. Anyways.
Yeah, I was like, this sounds great. Oh, man, this was a great experience. I also like how every time the X-Men got asked something about this, they like, fuck you. We've had to deal with this shit forever. Also, there were some X-Men comics, and they had literally nothing to do with Civil War except for the fact that they would mention that that's happening while they're dealing with their shit. But I was still interested in their shit. Also, I liked Wolverine's side story during that time, like the Wolverine comic, because Wolverine's like, everyone's fighting each other over who's gonna sign up and who's gonna not. I'm going after Nitro. You know, the guy who was the explosion and walked away from that incident. I'm going after him. And so it was him chasing down Nitro and even surviving Nitro exploding and reducing him pretty much to a skeleton, and whichever writer at that time being like, well, he had a couple of cells of tissue technically remaining and he regened off of that. Yeah, they eventually nerfed the hell out of Wolverine and made sure that couldn't happen again. But that writer was like,
I mean, he's Wolverine, though.
he ain't supposed to be that good at regenning, and because you got to have some kind of tension. And later on, I would notice through the comics, yeah, there are times where they do kind of put a limit of like, even you can't heal from this. Let's just say this.
It's like when they have movies now, and whether it be like a horror movie or some type of movie where they get lost in the woods, and because it's 2022 and they have to find a way to be like, cell phones can't work because blah 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 blah, because obviously what would I do if I'm being chased by a killer and I trap myself in this room? I'd call 911 fucking one. So it's like even you had to find a way to make it not work.
Yeah,
because obviously like a movie like Saw, this phone was made to receive calls, but it wasn't made to make them. Yeah, but you can still call 911, bitch.
Yeah. So after reading all those Civil War things and having my mind blown, becoming a Captain America fan, because I was only kind of somewhat interested in Captain America, because though I won't call myself a patriot for obvious reasons, I don't want to call myself a nationalist, because that just sounds like I hate everything else that's not America. But I'm somewhere in there. I do love my country, despite all of its flaws, and I will admit its flaws, and some shit needs to be fixed. Holy God, just let me like something for once without having to think that I'm saying it's the best thing ever. Bottom line is, I like being an American. Captain America kind of appealed to me, but then reading Civil War, I ended up siding more with him, because his thing was more like, we're supposed to be a free country, and yeah, there's a reason superheroes don't just sign up for everything, and it's not necessarily just about dodging accountability. Everybody's got their own reasons for what they want to. And there was some speech he gave Spider-Man that literally made Spider-Man switch sides after it. And I was like, that's a damn good speech. Okay, Captain America, I could see this. But the bottom line is, I read that and I'm like, well, now I want to read more comics. Well, let's see if using the same means of gathering digital versions of chapters that worked with Civil War, I could do that with X-Men. And so I got myself on a collection that was 40 years of Uncanny X-Men.
40.
Now, it was phrased as such because it was 40 years of one specific comic book, Uncanny X-Men. Not New X-Men, not New Mutants, X-Force, Excalibur, etc., if you will. It was none of that other stuff. It was just Uncanny X-Men, which still is a lot, because Uncanny X-Men went from 1963 till whatever. There's volumes 2 and 3 now, but still just calling it Volume 1 Uncanny X-Men, or not even needing a volume, just Uncanny X-Men, was like 500 chapters. But I didn't really get into them. Come 2010, like I didn't get into start reading it, because the 60s comics, pretty wordy, but they definitely had to be, because they're trying to explain to you everything here. You're not dealing with characters who have been around for 40 years. You're dealing with characters who are around now. Yeah, and they got to explain people's powers a lot more when they happen, or the characters say same shit every chapter, like, my eye beams can't be controlled by so-and-so, so-and-so. I got to make sure to do this with my ruby quartz glasses, and, because you're introducing people like, oh, this is what's happening.
Because in 2022, we know Cyclops and his powers. Even if people don't know his real name, everybody knows Cyclops and his powers. 63, the first time, we don't know who the fuck this is, right? So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so
he was introduced in 63, but you know what I mean.
What are you saying?
I said Cyclops wasn't introduced in the first 63, was he?
Yes.
Oh. Who were the original 5? Iceman, Beast, Angel, Jean Grey, and Cyclops?
Yeah.
Why did I think it was somebody else? Okay, anyway, never mind.
He was the original leader. He's the main character that I keep telling people.
Why did I think it was someone else? Okay,
he's the main character. But yeah, no, Scott's been around for fucking ever. Anyway, Scott Summers and the crew. But no, so I didn't read a lot of them. Come 2010, fall of 2010, I moved back to St. Louis. Because I was living in Orlando for a while. I moved back to St. Louis and don't really read the comics and nothing. I actually rewatch a lot of One Piece and get into 30 Rock as my binging habits at that time. But eventually, mid to late 2011, I have a good 2-month period where I had no cable or internet where I was living. Had electricity, but I had no cable or internet because money was tight. So, and I had no job. And so I was sitting around, and I pretty much come to the conclusion that I was moving out soon, or moving back to Orlando. So I wasn't necessarily looking hard for new jobs either.
Because you would have to start it and then stop it within like 4 weeks or some shit.
Yeah, I had my money saved up. I had enough money to saved up to move back, and I'm just moving back at this point. So what did I do? Oh yeah, I looked around, eventually being bored. I'm like, well, I can only watch so much of this, that, and the other. Don't really feel like playing X amount of game here or there for the umpteenth time.
A million fucking times, yeah.
Wait a minute. I have that collection of comics that I acquired digitally somehow.
Many comics.
I guess I'm gonna start reading those. All I've got is free time anyway. And so I did. I started reading Uncanny X-Men, and I was reading it, and eventually, once 1975 or so came around, luckily Giant Size X-Men was in there too, but once that year came around, luckily it was all in different folders based on the year and everything like that, so that was cool. But once I got to that point, I started to realize a problem with it being 40 years of Uncanny X-Men. There's a lot of series that cross over with other comic books, or a lot of arcs that cross over with other comic books.
You don't necessarily know what's happening.
For the next part, please read this. And then you come back and it's either one, sometimes 3 parts later in the same story arc, and you're like, I missed a lot. Oh well, I guess I'll try and put stuff together. And I did that, like, especially around the 80s, actually. It was around the 80s when New Mutants and X-Force came to be a thing. I think Inferno was the first big arc where I started noticing this happening. But nonetheless, by the time I moved back down to Orlando, I'm finishing up with it. And I'm like, cool. I read all of these. Come like 2012 goes through with me just being like, I know X-Men stuff. I still don't know a lot, and I kind of wish I did, but whatever. Then 2013 comes around, and I'm like, oh shit, this is the 50th anniversary of X-Men. I wonder what they're gonna do for the 50th anniversary of X-Men, which was also the 50th anniversary of Avengers, which also started around the same time in 1963. Fun fact. So they gotta do something big for these guys, right? I don't hear nothing that they did. Hindsight, the Avengers versus X-Men storyline kind of started in 2012 and probably bled into 2013. So that's probably what they did for the 50th anniversary of both, was a storyline involving the two, because there's surprisingly very little crossover between the two, aside from Beast leaving and becoming, or aside from random members of the X-Men leaving and being Avengers temporarily. There's not like a lot of crossover specials between the two, which comes up a lot in the Civil War interactions, like when Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel in the MCU, Miss Marvel at the time, also at one point Binary, who had a lot of experience with the X-Men and is a lifelong friend of Wolverine, tried to come to the X-Men's house to be like, hey, what are y'all doing about this Civil War thing? And Scott and Emma are like, we ain't doing shit, and how dare you come and ask us this right now? We thought you were coming because a school bus outside our own school just got blown up with a lot of kids in it because they were born mutants. They don't even have their powers anymore because of Wanda fucking Maximoff, but this random church was like, mutants are the devil, and they just killed a school bus full of kids. We thought you were coming to help us with that because we're calling families and sending people home. But no, you want us to help with your shit. Get the fuck out of here. There are 300 kids that died in Stanford. Oh no, we know. We were there. We were there helping clean up after that disaster. We helped y'all. Y'all never help us. Get the fuck out of our house. Deal with your own shit. And having read all the comics, when I got around to seeing that shit again, I was like, no, they right. The fuck? Carol, you should be thinking better than that, girl. Just saying. But I decided around 2013 to be like, well, if they're not gonna do anything for the X-Men's 50th anniversary, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna reread this series, and I'm gonna do it right, damn it.
Reread?
I'm gonna do it right this time. I'm going to read the site. I'm going to find the same method I used to acquire those original things. I'm going to use that method to acquire what I need to read the whole fucking story arcs I want to know. And it wasn't so much so I could be an expert. Actually, in like page 5 of episode 6 is when so.
You were just curious.
No, I wanted to be able to be like, if I met somebody that said they were a fan of X-Men, I wanted to be able to hold a conversation with them. I didn't want to be like, yeah, me too. Oh, you remember this? No.
The funny thing is, though, out of like all the people that I know, you're the only motherfucker that I really know that knows X-Men to this extent and read that much. And my dad...
Well, now I got a lot of more reading to do because... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I would say my dad, who was born in the 50s and grew up when comics were first dropping and read comics and knows to an extent about superheroes and certain shit to this day still. And I feel like you might probably have read more than his ass because you read like all them bitches, which is wild.
Mm-hmm. Now, there were some sides that, like, I'd say by the time I caught up, which was around 2015, because I was reading extra comics, and it wasn't like I sat there in front of my computer all day, every day. It was, oh, I ride the bus to work. Well, while I'm on the bus, read a chapter. While I'm on the bus home, read the chapter. I gotta take a shit. Guess I'll read the fucking chapter because I found a way to put them on my phone. All right, I'll read some chapters and do this. And, you know, that's how I eventually caught up. But still, it took me till about 2015 because there would be extra series and stuff. I eventually had to tell myself I'm not reading 100% of everything X-Men related because some characters I just do not give a fuck about. And I don't need to read their 2-issue, 3-issue miniseries.
Such as?
Well...
Just like throw a name.
Okay, well, if I throw out a name of an example, it would go against me saying I don't give a fuck about. I didn't care enough about certain characters to read their side series. Like, I didn't need to read Mystique's side series or stuff like that. It's like, I love you, Mystique. I love every time you're on the page and the normal thing, but I'm already reading like 8 series at this point. I gotta set this aside. Excalibur, I had to stop after chapter like 70 because...
That was a character named Excalibur?
No, that was a side series. It involved Kitty Pryde, Catherine Ann Pryde or whatever. Maybe not Ann, but Catherine Pryde. Shadowcat. Nightcrawler. Colossus. And Rachel Summers, who also eventually would go by Phoenix and Marvel Girl because she's Jean's daughter. It would just take her mother's surnames and also had Phoenix powers. And she's from an alternate universe. But involved them chilling in Britain with Psylocke's brother, who's Captain Britain, which is, if you're wondering why they didn't call Captain Carter Captain Britain, it's because Captain Britain's a separate character altogether. And has a different power set and everything, and is a mutant. Because, like I said, he's Psylocke's twin brother. He dealt, and him and Excalibur dealt a lot with multi-dimensional shit. Like, cause him and Psylocke's older brother Jamie has multiversal powers. Like, he pretty much sees the universe as a series of strings, and he can manipulate fucking reality and multi-dimensions however he wants. Literally, one time, Psylocke died, and he brought her back to life because he was gonna use her to deal with some other shit as a Deus Ex Machina later. But he was crazy, so no one would listen to him anyway. Wacky doo-doo, old Jamie Braddock.
That goes to the whole string theory thing anyway, right? That it's a whole
string theory, exactly.
It's a series of strings, and like each universe is strings, and it's like interwoven or passes or some wild shit. I don't fucking know.
Yeah, so Excalibur, though, when it got, because I wanted to read it up to a certain point, because due to the fact, because I liked the character Rachel Summers, or Rachel Gray. I liked her, but I knew she was unique to the multiverse in the sense that even though she'll show up in different time zone or timelines and this, that, and the other, it's always the same person. It's not a different version of her. It's literally her. Because in no alternate timeline do Scott and Jean have a daughter.
That is something that you don't hear happening, so that's interesting. And I mean, in like any medium with any story necessarily, you don't hear about that.
So much so that they made sure to even in the fucking movie, based off of when she debuted, they didn't even include her in that movie.
Which was Days of Future Past?
Yep. If you're one, because one of the main things that made me just raise a question mark when I finally saw that movie was Kitty's powers don't work that way.
Well, that's what everybody said. No, the original movie, she's the one that went back. She didn't send Wolverine back.
In the comics, yes.
I mean, not original movie, original comics. Yes.
In the comics, Rachel Summers sends Kitty's mind back to the past, to her past self, and does stuff from there. But Wolverine's more marketable in a grand scheme.
Exactly, Wolverine was like the star of the series at that point.
Yeah, Wolverine's, well, he's the star regardless, even if he's not necessarily the main character. He's the main character for anyone who doesn't read the fucking comics, because he's Wolverine. He's the easiest one to market. Ooh, shiny claws. And I love me some Wolverine. I love me some Logan.
And then what's her name? At that point, Elliot Page now, but Ellen Page at the time, as Shadowcat was already introduced. And they hadn't introduced Rachel, so they probably were just like, we're not gonna. It's already gonna be a confusing movie.
The movies were alternate universes anyway, so if Rachel's unique to the multiverse, we would have to write her into showing up in this movie, and we're not doing that.
It's like this, and they were like, this movie's already gonna be, any time travel movie, you run the risk of it being convoluted or like kind of like hard to follow.
Time travel movie, time travel in comics.
So they were like, we're just gonna not involve her anyway.
Yeah, as much as I love Days of Future Past as a storyline, I will say that irrevocably changed X-Men for all time. Because I'm pretty sure that was the introduction of time travel to X-Men specifically.
Okay.
And once that can of worms happened, boy, do they go to that well often.
It's such a pivotal story in X-Men that it was almost like once they introduced it, they couldn't just act like it didn't happen.
Yeah, so much that they eventually, go back to that universe, and then everybody that was there dies, but Rachel herself gets sent back to our timeline, and that's how she gets to be alive.
I don't know the comics nowhere near to the extent you do, but I still say that X-Men Days of Future Past is the best superhero movie I've ever seen.
I don't know about best superhero movie I've ever seen. However, it is a very solid movie in the X-Men franchise.
I mean, you could say that maybe The Dark Knight could be up there too.
Also, The Dark Knight does exist.
So
that is a very fantastic point.
And The Dark Knight is one of the best movies ever made. Fuck superhero. Like,
it is a fantastic film.
It's just the best, one of the best movies. And of course, one of the reasons it's one of the best movies ever made, I don't care what anybody says. People don't necessarily always say this. Not that they don't agree. They just don't say. One of the reasons why that movie is so fucking legendary is because of Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker.
Who the fuck doesn't like Heath Ledger's Joker?
I'm not saying that people don't like it. I'm just saying, if you took Heath Ledger as the Joker out of that movie, would it be considered as classic?
No.
There you go. That's all I'm saying.
But
I don't feel like
that was. I didn't think that was an unpopular opinion.
I'm not saying unpopular. I'm saying it's not said, but maybe it's not said because it doesn't need to be said.
Yeah. I figured everyone just realized that that's because what everyone agrees on when you bring it up. Some people like Joaquin's Joker, but they're usually too young to remember fucking Heath Ledger Joker anyway.
I still haven't seen Jack Nicholson. Or if I did, no, that came out in '89. So if I did see it,
there ain't no way you didn't see Jack Nicholson's Joker. You may not be fully cognizant.
I was like, I might have been way too goddamn young. I mean, I barely have a memory of like one little like blip of Independence Day because I was way too young to remember that shit. So,
I know I've seen Independence Day a lot more lately because I got some friends that literally watch it every 4th of July.
That's hilarious. But yeah, like what, him beating up aliens and
walking to Earth.
Him fucking up aliens and whatever in that movie is a little more, might be a little more fitting. Let me stop. But nah, man, don't you
ever put my planet's name in your mouth? Or no, keep my planet's name out your fucking mouth.
Doesn't matter how long it takes you to get there, as long as you get there. It took you a minute to figure out what the fuck. No, I've said before. I say like it's definitely some movies where I've seen them, but I was so young when I saw them. It's like I didn't see them. Mm-hmm. Independence Day is one of them. I'm pretty sure Jack Nicholson in Batman is one of them. Or just I should just say the original Batman. Period.
Michael Keaton was in the movie too. Did a good job.
That's why I was like, we were talking about Jack Nicholson, but what's her name? Michelle Pfeiffer is Selena Kyle, Catwoman in the second one, Returns. Yeah, okay. I know Danny DeVito played Penguin. I don't know.
Christopher Walken was in.
Was he for real?
Mm-hmm. Max Schreck.
Oh shit. Has Zaz has been in one of them, hasn't he?
Sure. I don't know. Maybe.
You know who Victor Zaz is.
I know the name. Yeah.
He's like some dude that I think is just
like some murderer assassin dude that everyone knows.
This was so funny. I don't know that much about him, so I stopped I paused because my description wasn't gonna be worth shit. I was gonna say he's some dude that's just like some crazy guy. Like that's what I was gonna say, and I was like,
I mean, to be fair, that's all I really know about him, my damn self.
What's so funny is it's like, so you mean every villain? You mean Batman himself?
They do have a lot of people with mental issues in the Batman universe.
I mean, his arch nemesis is a crazy guy. So,
also true.
Or you could just say, is he crazy or is he actually the most sane person in there? And that's the debate. How many?
He's crazy.
You know what I mean. How many X-Men comics or just comics in general would you estimate that to be that you've read?
Over 1,000.
Jesus.
Because Uncanny X-Men, like I said, was around, if not at least 500.
gee.
For volume 1.
Right.
New X-Men, or All New X-Men, whichever one. The one that came out in the 90s, which would eventually be called X-Men Legacy, got up to 200 or something in and of itself. So we're already at about 700. X-Force had about 80 chapters. I'm sorry, X Factor had about 80 chapters before I stopped caring about it, because it stopped being the original 5 X-Men and became about Havoc and some people I didn't care about. Well, I cared about Havoc and Polaris, but I didn't care about Strong Guy and Multiple Man and Valerie Cooper. I don't care.
I never heard of Strong Guy, but I have heard of Multiple Man.
If I show you a picture of Strong Guy, you might recognize him from just being a generic, like, background comic character in the 90s. Like, he has a unique look to him, but his name was fucking Strong Guy. But I'm a strong guy.
I mean, right, his name isn't a lie, I'm assuming.
Nah, but he was very 90s, very weird. Very evil. No. Danhausen.
I got it, mother.
Excuse me. But yeah, no. So X Factor had a ton. New Mutants had, I think, 80. I think around issue 90 is when Deadpool and Cable start showing up in New Mutants, which then becomes X-Force. So that's over 100 or something chapters of just dealing with that group of kids as they grow up and what they go through. Cable, I've read a lot of his series. There's Deadpool stuff. There's, like I said, there's multiple X-Men series. There's a few new X-Men series or new mutants or like younger generation X-Men type deal things that pop up. So I'm going to go ahead and say I can easily say 1,000 without actually counting them. Because eventually, like I said, that sometimes there's side series that pop up. Like
side series, yeah.
In the 80s is when they start splintering off with some of the side series. Like first is New Mutants, where while the X-Men are trapped in space because reasons, Charles starts raising up some new kids to be his new X-Men. And we get Sam Guthrie, Cannonball, Danielle Moonstar, who's Mirage when she first starts, Sean Coyman, Rain Sinclair, and Robert, who's Wolfsbane. Sean Coyman is Karma or whatever. Rain Sinclair, a.k.a. Wolfsbane, and Roberto DaCosta, Sunspot.
So I know Sunspot definitely.
Yeah, so yeah, they all join and start, learning. It turns out that particular Professor X that recruited them had an ulterior motive because it was technically an alien infesting Professor X's body. It was just going to use the kids as hosts for more of her alien brood, because the brood were an alien species that the X-Men dealt with that were loosely based off the Xenomorphs from Alien back then. But by the time, they come back and they deal with that whole aspect of it, then they're like, well, we still got these kids here at the house. Also, Kitty, you need to join that group. And Kitty's like, no, the hell I don't. I don't care if I'm the same age as them. I've been an X-Men. I've been to fucking space. Yeah, and you're 14. You shouldn't have to have dealt with life or death adventure at the edge of space. You should probably be like the other kids. This is some bullshit. Because Kitty's been part of the X-Men since she was like 13 or so. Literally was there to replace Jean when Jean died. But not as a telepath. That eventually, the telepath they got to replace Jean was Elizabeth Braddock, aka Psylocke. Oh, that reminds me. I saw a funny tweet or a funny thing on Facebook the other day, where someone was like 10 rules of X-Men fighting, or like fighting as an X-Men is like 1, always jump your opponent. 2, have a telepath. 3, so and so, so and so. 4, jump your opponent. 5, do so and so, so and so. 6, have a telepath. 7, jump your opponent. Never fight one-on-one. Do this, that, and the other. And I'm like, the X-Men do jump on every set. No, that's not a false statement. They do a lot of jumping on their opponent. So I couldn't help but laugh. And also the whole rule that there has to be a telepath, while not directly stated, definitely always seems to happen. Like, initially, Jean was just a telekinetic. Like, she could just move things with her mind. Charles was a telepath, and Charles has always only been a telepath. But when Charles dies in the 60s, they need, they're like, well, what are we going to do? Well, Jean's like, well, luckily, before he died, he taught me how to, do telepathy. Oh, so we got a telepath, and we can still have that aspect of the team. So now Jean has telepathy and telekinesis. Then later Charles is like, I faked my death because I have to send out a super telepathic message to the ends of space. And so they do.
Fucking comics.
But eventually, Jean dies, and they lose contact with Charles, but luckily Psylocke comes into the picture. Also, like, the New Mutants eventually have their own kind of mini telepaths involved with them. They always that's part of the X-Men formula. Someone's got to be a telepath communicating to the others, because eventually Rachel also comes in and is the makeshift replacement for Jean when she comes from the future to the present timeline and gets stuck there. The New Mutants. When they start teaming up with Cable for X-Force, Cable's a telepath.
I mean, your mama.
Although, I'm not sure if he tells him he's a telepath early on. I think he's just a dude with big guns. Because they go a while before they tell you who Cable actually is. Like, they even make you think somebody else is Cable's real identity before they reveal that Cable's real identity. They have you thinking Cable is a clone of the guy who's a clone of him.
Jesus, see, fucking comics, good God. When you were reading,
go ahead.
I know you could. When you were reading these comics, I know there had to be several times where you were like, "Fuck, I'm bored and I want to stop," but you were like, "I gotta see where it goes at least."
There were times.
You never got that bored?
What? Let me answer.
A little bit.
There were times where there would be like 2 or 3 comics, or maybe a stretch of like 4 or 5, where I wasn't feeling that story arc. But I knew, obviously, this series is going on forever, so it'll get good again. Or when I'm reading like multiple things, I was like, well, this is still kind of lame, but hey, I've got this to look forward to. I can read this. This series is killing it right now. Like, oh, New Mutants is kind of lame right now, but Uncanny? My God.
What?
The Chris Claremont years were some of the best years of that series. From 75 to 91.
Talking some X-Men shit. That's a span. But talking some X-Men shit. I remember one time you like brought his name up and talked about how good he was.
He's the reason we have a lot of the X-Men characters that people know and love now. Your Wolverines, your Nightcrawlers, your Storms, your Colossuses, your Kitties, your Rachels, your whole Hellfire Club, your Rogues, your Gambits, your Jubilees, your Mr. Sinister, Apocalypse, etc. Well, maybe not Apocalypse. That might be somebody else. But Sinister definitely. And just 75 to 91, this man had control over that series.
That's some time. What do you remember the wackest, like one of the wackest stories or moments or whatever? Like you were like, this is some lame shit. No, it's up here.
Off the top of my head, I can't say, because there's a lot of good that goes with it. I can say it probably happened in the 90s, whatever it was. Because the 90s do have a reputation for being bad.
For all comics.
For being a bad time for comics. Yeah. I will say that's probably because if you were reading them at the time when it's a month waited between each chapter, if every chapter ain't hitting, or at least every other chapter ain't hitting, you have a month, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 months to stew on some shit.
How shitty it was.
Yeah. I will say a lot of the stuff involving Joseph, by the time it ended, was not good. Joseph is a guy who they thought was a Magneto who had amnesia, but turned out to be some weird clone of Magneto or some weird shit. I don't remember. It was weird. That's all you really need to know. Joseph was dumb. Some of the early 2000s X-Men, where they decided to go with the black leather look, kind of like what they did with the movies, where whoever was in charge was like, superhero costumes are lame. They're just lame.
And they gave it like a more present day for that era look.
Yeah,
like
realistic, they are real people.
Realistic leather, yeah.
Which they ended up using with the movies.
They had like the X symbol somewhere on it, but otherwise it was like, I'm just wearing a jacket. I just got on leather pants.
I do like how at one point in the comics, Scott's like, yeah, we need to fix our image. First things first, we're putting the costumes back on. Oh, really? Yeah. We want people to treat us like superheroes. We should dress like it.
What was I gonna say? You ever thought about reading like another comic, whatever, like another comic franchise, whatever the fuck, like you did X-Men?
Yes, I tried Avengers, but going back to the 60s and dealing with 60s style with characters that I had less of a care about.
And then you talk about side series. If you're reading Avengers, and you're gonna have to read fucking the side series probably for like every goddamn character to a point, because it's the amalgamation of every fucking body.
I once considered Spider-Man.
Spider-Man seems like it'd be a good one.
But then there's the era that I've had people rant to me about in the 90s where, boy, you thought X-Men gets confusing with its time travel shit. Spider-Man people are like, hold my web. And let's talk about all of these people, like who all these fake Spider-Man, who's the real Spider-Man, Clone Saga, and just, is this guy actually Spider-Man the whole time? What about this guy? What about I don't remember the exacts because I didn't read it myself, but just know I sat around for about a half hour and had no idea what the guy was still talking about. Kind of like you've been doing here.
Shout out! Oh no, I've been listening to everything you're saying and comprehending. Shout out to I talked about Halloween Ends on the last episode, but no. Shout out to the dude who did the video on YouTube. I forget who it was, but if you look it up, I'm pretty sure you'll find it because it got like over 1 million views of the complete ultimate history of Spider-Man. And he went from 1 up until Spider-Man died and the whole Superior Spider-Man and all that shit. So shout out to that shit. But what about DC?
If I ever found my comics again, I might try to read Static and shit. I read a lot of Steel and Static in the 90s because I had a lot of Steel and Static. I don't remember a lot of Steel and Static, but I know I read like 40, 50 chapters of each, which when I was that young was a lot.
The show was hitting too. That was my shit.
Oh yeah. Well, I didn't want to watch the show because I had the comics at first. I eventually watched the show, but the main reason I didn't like the comics is because, especially with Static, even though I love me some lightning powers, which I still think it's hilarious that they love giving black people electricity powers.
People have talked about that, and it is kind of funny how that works. But yes,
although I don't have a problem with it. Lately, the main vein I've seen people in is like it's somehow racist, and I'm like, but lightning powers are cool. Why? Get mad about something else.
It's just funny how it always happens that way.
Yeah. But no, it's like something like the origin of the black electric superhero. Boom, 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 boom. I'm like, I'm not watching this video because you're definitely going to be like, it's rooted in some fucking ancient times where no one in modern day would ever put these two topics together, but they did back then, and so you should retroactively hate everything related to it. No, Let me think that this character is cool and the power is cool. Thank you. Because I don't care if that's what they meant back then. Nowadays, it's just, this is what it is. And that's the only way we can move past these things, is if we start living in the present. Anyway, Static was interesting, but I didn't want to do it back then because it was just so heavy with the gang violence and the whole, it's hard being black in America. And I'm like, I know it's hard being black in America. I didn't have the words to express it as, I don't want my escapism to be a glimpse into reality. Because comics and stuff is escapism.
That is a very interesting way to put that, but I feel you.
You know, at least with X-Men, it's an allegory for racism and civil rights and stuff, and they do go hella heavy sometimes. Some people, like Kitty, go a little too heavy with the allegories. Well, she also has to deal with anti-Semitism on top of being a mutant, so she just don't like racists.
I kept trying to find how I always have like a little slick wordplay offshoot of what you said to go ahead and be like, well, this.
I'm not gonna lie. A few times I thought you were trying to end it, and I was just like,
the last two things you said were in some anti-Semitism, and I was like, I'm not gonna find a funny little offshoot off of those. So look for me anywhere you stream music under the name Superjaz, Superjaz. The debut solo album I dropped last year was titled My Secret Identity. Any streaming platform for music, you may have to put in Superjaz, My Secret Identity, because I'm not so famous yet. Also, you can find me on Twitter under the handle Superjaz2, which is the word Superjaz number 2. And then, of course, you can find me on Instagram under the name Forever Superjaz, the word forever spelled correctly. Who can they find you?
Well, obviously, they can find me here every week, every Wednesday on the Whatever We Want podcast. You can also find me elsewhere on Twitter. Elsewhere on YouTube and the feogrande. That is Feo Grande. Got some videos over there talking about lots of stuff, including a series called This Guy Hasn't Seen, which is another podcast in and of itself where we review movies, trading them back and forth with my good friend Bill Smith. This week, we're doing Hokuto no Ken, Fist of the North Star, 1991's English dub. Hadn't really seen that version of it, but I was just showing him Fist of the North Star. Fun watch. I mean, it's Fist of the North Star. If you know, you know. Also, you can find me on Twitter and Twitch at Giotavi. That is Giotavi. Come on in. Stop on by. Ragnarok's coming out soon. I'm going to be playing a lot of that.
Let's get it. And as always, because of the fact that we can never shut the hell up about wrestling, we went ahead and we made a podcast devoted just to wrestling. So on this exact same channel, is it coming out? Did it come out early this week? I don't know. I think if it didn't come out early, it may have already dropped. But the first Sunday of every month.
Coming Sunday. Okay.
The first Sunday of every month, we have a podcast devoted just to wrestling. It's not beholden to an hour. It's beholden to until we run out of shit to say. So talking about what happened in the previous month, wrestling wise, and its first Sunday wrestling drops on this same Whatever We Want channel. So go ahead and check that out. All my wrestling heads or people who just want to hear us talk again and are curious about what's happening in wrestling. All that being said, whether it be about X-Men, whether it be about Mr. Brady, but whatever it be about, you would think I would fucking know by now, man. This is fucking embarrassing. I'm sorry. What the fuck are we gonna talk about next time?
Whatever we want.
Be nice to yourself, everybody.
Adiosness.